welcome. We're live. We're the Young Jurks. My name is Mike Crawford. I am the host. Have a very big show today for you. We have a live studio audience already. This is like the warm-up to our huge April 27th event that we're going to be promoting today as well as AnyCan, which is next weekend. We'll be there. We'll be giving away tickets. I think they're worth about $100. These are great passes to New England Cannabis Convention coming up next weekend at the Heinz Convention Center, Friday and Saturday. Call in, 502-501-3477. We're going to give at least a pair away in each hour of the show today. So call in early. We have some special guests. Before we get to the guests, I just want to make a moment. We lost a good person this week, a good community member, a member of the music community, someone I'm going to miss, someone my family is going to miss. Asa Brebner passed away this week. I just wanted to make note of that. I'm going to miss Asa. I know a lot of us are going to miss Asa Brebner. If you don't know about Asa, you should definitely check him out. Look up his music. He's a great man, great artist. I know a lot of people are suffering this week. My family, Carmelita especially, some of my other friends that I see on Facebook. I'm just giving you love this week. I know we lost someone very special, Asa Brebner. All right, so we're going to get to the guests. Very excited to have in studio today, a couple in studio guests. Number one, later on 7 p.m., we're going to have Barney Frank live in the studio, U.S. Congress Rep. Barney Frank. And right now I have a city councilor at large candidate in Boston. She's highly recommended. I found her through a couple people, but when the biggest troll around recommends you, there may be something there. So I said, I better reach out. He's always right.
Who's that?
Brian Riccio. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah. Well, Twitter friend.
Your Twitter friends?
Yeah.
Everyone's either Twitter friends or Twitter blocked or Twitter enemies of Brian Riccio. My boy. So we have a city council candidate at large in Boston, Alejandra St. Gian.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming down. So you were a school teacher, right?
I was a school teacher. I started my career in education before I went into public service, working at the State House, and then I ran a statewide Latino civic engagement and political organization. And after which I was the director for immigrant advancement at the city of Boston. So
you have, I'm sure, a lot to say about education and immigration.
I have a lot to say about education and immigration and other things too. But yeah, those are definitely my backgrounds. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've been able to spend my career in work that I love and service to others. And so this has been really an exciting opportunity to expand upon my knowledge base and envision what we can do for the city in terms of education and immigrants, but also just learning so much about what are the needs of the city. Housing, obviously, what rises to the top when you're talking to anyone about anything. Rent's really.
Too damn high.
Yeah, it's too high, and people are being priced out. My own family was priced out of Mission Hill, so I understand intimately, but I'm starting to learn even more about the actual policies and what are the things that we can do as a city council to really create a city that is equitable for everybody. I think we're at a crossroads right now, and the city that we want to see is the city that's going to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years is really going to be dependent upon the policies that we put in place right now, and that's everything from education to being underwater from our climate change and our resilience or lack of resilience to what's definitely coming down the road.
When you mention housing, I always bring this up because everyone is talking about it, but
yeah,
I don't see enough real action on it.
Yeah.
Like what steps would you be wanting to see happen?
Yeah. So I think the thing with housing there's a couple things why it trips people up a bit. One is when you talk about affordable housing, most of which is regulated by the federal government, right? So the money comes through the state, then goes to the city, and so things like area median income and what affordable means is actually regulated by the federal, and it's not affordable, right? So because our area median income is Metro Boston, so in many neighborhoods across Boston, they don't reach anywhere near. It's sometimes not even half of what the area median income is. And then the other difficulty is that it's a private market, right? The regular market is a private market. So people say, well, what can we do really to impact housing? But there are things that we can do. There are things that the city's already doing that we could do better. So we have an acquisition fund where the city is able to help nonprofits purchase homes or buildings and keep them affordable. It's a lot, but we needed much more money in there to actually make a dent. Our inclusionary development policy, which is at 13%, our buildings developers need to have 13% affordable or pay into linkage fees, to build affordable housing somewhere else. That could go up.
You think that number should go up?
I think it should go up. There's arguments that, well, it's too expensive and developers will choose not to build. I find that really hard to believe. I mean, Boston is very attractive on a number of reasons. Their profit might be a little bit less, but they're definitely making a profit, even if it's 20, 30, even 40%. The steps that we take are going to have to be pretty bold, because we're already fast tracking through lots of neighborhoods, right? So we're talking Roxbury right now. That's a conversation that should have happened 15, 20 years ago, right? We need to start really thinking Mattapan, Hyde Park, because these are the places that are now is the time to have the conversations about those areas and start building there and start innovative policies there, or else in 10 or 15 years, we're going to talk about how nobody can afford Mattapan and how nobody can afford Hyde Park. I think that there are things that we can do. That Rep. Connolly at the State House has legislation in place that would give back control to the cities for things like being able to raise the transfer fee. So if we raise how much we charge people when they sell, right? Yeah. And that's hugely important, particularly for the flippers, the millionaire flippers, right? So if we're able to control that without going through a home rule petition, that will give us a lot of leverage. I also think it could open the door to give us leverage on rent control again. There are places, Berlin put a 5-year moratorium on rent increases. They said can't do it, can't increase the rent.
See that in Boston?
Oh my God, I would love to see that in Boston. I mean, you read where people's rent are going up 200, 300. I mean,
all the time. Everyone I know has been moving the last couple of years.
Yeah,
and they're moving again and again and again.
And I just feel like, so Boston, we lost so much population in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and the people who stayed here and the people who came here and built this city and made it what it is are the ones who no longer can afford to live here. And so,
what a shame.
And so for me, I feel like that we need to at all costs protect that, to protect those communities, because we also we want those communities. We want the cultural richness. We want, the economic diversity. We want the ethnic diversity, of course, and if we just continue to go down this road, we'll turn into a city of the rich and the poor. And for me, that's not the fabric of Boston. That's not the Boston I know. That's not the Boston that my parents, chose to live. My father's an immigrant from Venezuela. My mother's a transplant from New Hampshire. And so, for me, there's so much at stake right now. And there are some places, like I said, like Roxbury, East Boston, where it's happening so fast, and we really have to get a handle on it. And then places where we know it's going to just start to happen really fast as well. And for me, like I said, education, immigration, all of these things are super important to me, and housing impacts all of that. So the ability to live, to have housing stability,
it's the biggest thing now.
Impacts everyone.
We talked about how it's even affected like our show, like the rent's too high for creatives, for artists, and people starting companies, and we're very lucky to be at Down the Road Beer Company. We want to plug them.
Yes.
They've really helped us out.
I love this place. I wish we had Well, I think we have some breweries in Boston, but this place is awesome.
It is very nice. And we want to welcome, we have an audience here. We had the two Eds watching, and we also have a bridal shower or something going on
It's
over
like
here.
a bridal St. Patrick's Day shower
it's
combo.
pretty cool. Now, maybe there are some potential voters. We'll have to hit them up. We have a phone call. We'll take the call. We'll see who's on the... Oh, we lost it? We're taking phone calls. 502-501-3477. We're sorry we didn't answer your phone call quick enough. Call in again, 502-501-3477, especially if you have a question for the city council candidate. I want to ask you some other questions.
Sure.
This is maybe a quick one, maybe not, but safe injection sites has come up as a big issue in Boston with the mayor talking about it. I've had some other city council candidates, Ricardo Arroyo, come in. He says he supports safe injection sites. Where do you see yourself on that issue?
Yeah, I mean, I support it. I think, it's been shown in other cities that it has really helped, particularly with the control of disease through needles. And I think that, right now we have we're having issues with needles being found in schoolyards and, having to pick up needles along the corridor there along Melnia Cass and so forth. So
and even in schools, there's been some stories that the kids can't even play in the schoolyard. They're just there every morning.
Yeah, because Orchard Park, the Orchard Park School is right there on Recovery Road. So where there's a lot of drug activity, and so. I'm just listening to my son crying in the background.
And his name's Jose?
His name's Jose.
Where is Jose?
He's over there.
With your wife?
He's with my wife, Josiane.
We should mention that. You brought your wife and your
my wife
son,
and
Jose.
my young son, Jose. But I think, it's not something that I know a whole lot about. What I've read, to me it sounds like a great idea and something that I know. I understand that people find it controversial. Where is it going to be? And
where is it going to be is always going to be the issue.
But that's going to be an issue for everything.
Sure.
I mean, we have lengthy meetings about where dog parks are going to be, right? So, but if it's someplace that's going to keep those who are suffering through addiction safe and is going to keep them and help prevent them spreading disease amongst themselves or to others, and also the added benefit of taking the needles off the streets, physically off the streets, I think that there's a lot. And it's also, as we know, we wouldn't just open a place, say, come in and safely inject here. Obviously, there's going to be support services there. I can imagine that, the goal will be to also treatment and get people the help that they need.
And I want to make sure people are aware, because I think a lot of people, when they hear about this, I notice especially the Facebook comments, people don't quite understand what this is. They think that the state's paying for this. No, the state wouldn't be paying. This is private, like if Brigham and Women or someone who's a medical professional, a medical group, sometimes it's churches, those types of folks, the folks who are vested in this community who want to help, who have medical experience, they're doing it with private funds.
No, definitely. And I think, I think it we have to look at all our residents and the value that they bring to us, and we should commit to keep all our residents safe, and that includes those that are suffering through addiction.
I agree so much, because I've lost friends to this, and I just wonder, if they could have lived a little longer and maybe they got treatment. Because that's what we all want to see.
My father, he passed away when I was younger, but in growing up, the work that he did was with those that were addicted, and particularly young people, and going through the court system. And so for me, I've always seen the importance of being able to, for people who are addicted, to get through and be able to live their full potential.
Oh, Jose wants to come see his mama. I love this. Oh, this is great. He as soon as he found out he could come near you, he stopped crying.
Yes.
I noticed that.
Yes.
Now he's good.
Yeah, but he wanted the wires, so
he did. He went. Now he's on. He's like, all right, I'm not being held back from Mama.
Yeah.
What can I destroy? I love it, Jose. Go again. Now he's off.
Yeah.
That's all he
I'm gonna owe my wife a few beers after this.
This is awesome. Yeah, this is kind of a crazy place to bring. But Yeah, thank your wife for this.
Yeah. I mean, the campaign trail is just so hard, right? There's just so much time that you spend away, and
Weekends.
yeah, and whenever you can, and it hasn't even fully heated up, right? It's only March, so if possible, we try to bring him, but he's still a little young.
Yeah, he's a baby.
He's a baby.
He's cute. I want to ask you some other questions. Elected school committee.
Yeah.
Where are you on that issue?
Yeah. So I support an elected school committee. I think that, I understand that the reason for moving to the appointed system years ago in terms of not being able to have diversity on the school committee. But, I think we are a different city. We are a different electorate. The thing most important to me is I believe that there should be independence between the school committee and City of Boston, the administration, because I think it works better for our students, and when they have an avenue that they can fully advocate through, and that would be a school committee that's independent of the City of Boston administration. If there's another way to do it that wasn't elected, I would be open to it. I don't envision. Some people say a hybrid model. I'm open to what that would look like, definitely. But for me, because of my own personal history, because of my professional work as a teacher, for me, the Boston Public Schools is really one of the key areas where we need to get it right. And we can, because we are Boston. Again, we are the epicenter of universities, of tech, of business. People come here to solve big problems. That's what they do. That's what they're doing across the city. And so we should be able to do that right there in our own backyard. And I think having a superintendent that is able to have autonomy, have a level of was the phone call?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we got a caller on the line. Who's calling?
Hi, this is Chandra.
Hey, Chandra, how you doing?
Hi, Chandra.
Hey, how are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Good. You're speaking to Alejandra St. Gian. She's a city council candidate. What's up? You got a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you congratulations. I just got singing in a concert for the women's chorus for Women's Lunch Place, and I'd love to hear you speak more about issues that affect poor women of color in the city and state right now.
Yep.
Because unfortunately, only 2.5% of the cannabis industry are people of color, and I'd love to hear you speak more about the issues of employment for people of color in the state and this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Definitely, I think when we look across the board at all factors, whether it be maternal health, whether it be employment, whether it be access to education, we see poverty and people of color, and particularly women of color, who are facing the greatest odds. And our trans women of color, in particular, have also been are particular risk for particular risk across the board as well. And so, I think that for us to really face, we have to look at the issues and how they impact women of color, poor women of color. And I think that, Ayanna Pressley, when she was a counselor and she created the Committee on Healthy Women and Girls, she was really the first person to elevate that as an issue that the city council would be able to take on. And I see it tremendously as an important factor as we think about. And I'm glad you mentioned the cannabis industry, because we know that communities of color have been the most victimized by the war on drugs. And so at this point in time, when there is a possibility to have revenue and to have, to be able to work within that industry, I think we have to do an extra push to make sure that people of color and women of color in particular are taking leadership roles. I didn't know the 2.5%. Thank you. That's a low number.
Really low.
When you look
It's
at
an incredibly low number.
It's incredible.
And that's nationwide right now.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the lack of opportunities across the board in all industries for women of color and young women of color. As a woman of color myself, I understand that the factors that that restrict you to having those access. I think also, and you mentioned poor, right? You mentioned poor, and I think that is also a key factor. We don't talk poverty enough, right? We talk, and I'm guilty of it too. I know education, I know immigration, I know housing, but at the core of all of these issues is poverty.
Yeah.
People can't afford because they don't have a living wage, and people, so they're moving around, and so their schools are, there's not consistency at the schools, or I think at the end of the day, to have a real commitment, it's been decades since we've had a real commitment to addressing the issue of poverty, definitely on a national scale, but on a city scale as well. And so, it's definitely something that I would love to take up as a city councilor, and I really appreciate the question, because it's making me think. I'm like, okay, I haven't really kind of broken it down through that lens before, and it impacts all the issues that I care about, and the most vulnerable, and speaks to the most vulnerable in our city. So thank you, Shauna.
Thank you, Chandra.
You're welcome.
Did you also want tickets to AnyCan?
Yes, I wanted to get a NECAN so I can represent. I'm a black patient of color who was one of the founding patients of NAS Patients, and I eat every day at the Women's Lunch Place, which is a drop-in center for people who are poor and homeless. Mm-hmm. And I actually sing in a chorus here, and I think that it's time that we actually have black representation in cannabis, and I'm one of the few black people I know in this industry. Me and about 5 other people, including Chanel Title.
Yep.
Yes. So you want tickets? You say that again, because I think the guys behind the boards are laughing because you said it right and I didn't. Where are the tickets for, Chandra?
They're for the New England Cannabis Conference, NECAN.
NECAN. I don't know. Is that right? You were laughing back
Yes.
there. They're laughing at me. I love it. The guys behind the board can laugh at me. Thank you, Chandra, for making them laugh at me.
I'll see you next Saturday.
We will see you Saturday. Make sure you reach back out, because I want to make sure that you have all the directions on how to get tickets.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandra. Great phone
Great.
call.
Thank you. Great question.
As a follow-up on that, there's a bill that Senator Jason Lewis put out recently, and it's basically asking about boards, corporate boards, that women and people of color are underrepresented, and to basically make that, if there's 35%, or let's say it's 52% women, 52% women have to be on the board, something like that. Is that something that you'd...
And regulated through the state?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I haven't... On its value, it sounds like something I would support, but I haven't seen. I actually hadn't heard of it. I know
guess
that
California did it. They're the first ones, and we'll be the second ones.
California's
I know,
always coming up front.
Right.
We got to get in front of California one day.
And my specifics could be a little bit wrong on it, but I know Boston Public Radio, Jim Browdy talks about this a lot too, which I like.
Yeah. No, I've seen that issue driven in particular through. Different professional organizations, right?
Like
so
activists,
and
even
the partnership or Amplify X, or there's a whole movement to get women. It's more women pay equity. So I think there's definitely an appetite for it there. I think, I was talking about this morning with one of the ward committees. It's like the argument that the people just don't exist is one that we should all refuse to accept anymore. We know that we have we have the talent, we have the people, and we need to be able to capture them and keep them here in Boston and help develop them so they can reach that C-suite. It's not... I think it's hugely important, and it is impactful, and I think even if it's not an industry, I've never been in the private sector, so it's not something that I'm super familiar with, but these access to promotions and access to power are limited across the board in all industries, and so I think if there is a role that government could play to help that or enforce it, then I would definitely be in favor.
Excellent. looking at some other questions. Big one that we kind of, maybe mentioned tonight, but not really. It comes up a lot with the next show. Well, actually, speaking of that, we have some comments online as well.
Sure.
And, I said you came recommended by a few people.
Yeah.
One of the other people is on there,
Oh,
and
okay.
he's on the next show.
Oh, okay.
Calvin Feliciano.
Yes,
Calvin?
I love Calvin. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
it's wonderful.
so he's shouting you out on our
Oh.
Facebook Live.
Oh,
He's
good,
watching.
good.
But, their show talks a lot, and the name of the group that on their Facebook is Violence in Boston.
Yep.
And Monica's been covering this and,
Yep.
and really doing,
Yep.
great stuff.
Yep.
How do we, what is the solution? Because I think Monica makes a great point for folks like, where I'm from and where other people are, where their mindset's at. Violence is down. We think that the gun laws work. But in Dorchester, Roxbury, that's not the case. In
Right.
Lawrence, it's not the case.
Right.
In certain places, it's not the case.
Right.
So what do we do on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was just commented on an article that I saw the other day about a panel where Monica Grant, I imagine you're talking about.
Monica Cannon Grant.
Monica
Yes.
Cannon Grant brought young people who were impacted by young people of color impacted by violence in order to, and the article said interrupt, and I put interrupt in parentheses because for me, not parentheses, quotation marks, because for me it's not interrupt. How are you interrupting when you're bringing an issue? And I think that we somehow are making a distinction between gun violence at schools, right? Gun violence and mass shootings, and gun laws, and that's a different issue than violence in our communities and poor communities of color. And I'm not exactly sure why we're making that distinction, because as the points were made, students are getting shot on their way to school, right? Or they're getting, or having to take Ubers in order to not get shot.
The more and more I look at this stuff, I think it's, if you really start to think about this, if you've observed it for a while, it's pretty obvious why. It's racism.
Yeah.
It is racism.
Oh, yeah.
I
no,
mean, we look
by
at
far.
what happens with white teens.
Yeah.
And the way that, already this guy that just killed 48 people or whatever in New Zealand, there's a, one of my friends, E-Rock, posted the magazine cover and saying, he was such a nice young man. They never say that about a black guy.
Oh, God.
But they say that
I
about the
know.
white serial killer who
Yeah.
killed 48 people this morning in New Zealand. You know what I mean? It's just...
It's crazy how we
treat people differently.
Yeah, and we humanize white perpetrators in a way that we would never humanize people of color, perpetrators or victims, and that's an
and I'm not saying that we shouldn't humanize people, even killers. Maybe that's a different discussion, ethically and all that. But it just, if we only treated everybody like we treat white people. I'm not saying we should treat white people worse, all right? I'm saying that we should treat everyone like we treat white people.
Right. And that's what equity is, right? You're not saying that you have to take one to give to another group. For me, just back to the issue of violence in Boston, because it's one that's particularly important to me, is that we have to see where are we failing across the board, because it's not just the gun laws, right? It's our trauma services, it's our education system, it's our housing, all of the reasons that cause people to feel unstable. And the other thing is that when we are having discussions about gangs, or we're having discussions about getting involved or in violence, we need to include the people who the victims, but also the perpetrators themselves. We need to include people who are currently in gangs or were formerly in gangs. I think that, for me, honestly, the most important policies come from the people most impacted. And I think, like I said, when I was saying humanize the victims as well. It's like when there's someone shot in Roxbury, it should be front page Globe, and we should see their face, and we should, have days and days of coverage about who they were and who they could be and how special they were. And if we did that, and that was happening 40, 50, 60 times, a year as the shootings are happening, perhaps people would have a different perspective on that. And for me, it is very much race, and is very much seeing the mainstream, seeing themselves, being able to picture themselves. One of the things that bothers me the most is when there's a reporting on someone getting shot or getting killed, and one of the first things that's said is it's possibly gang related. And I feel like even if it is, I just feel like it's an unnecessary addition to an article, because it sort of gives people the permission to say, oh, gang related, okay, so that's I'm okay, it's not me, it's those people. And from media to police to schools, we really need to figure out how we actively criminalize young men of color in particularly, and the impact that that's having on our communities.
Now, there's been some programs. Tito Jackson was talking about one in California at a city or town where they were actually paying people to stay out of trouble. Mm-hmm. And there's also things like, this movement nationally where, because jobs are going to get automated, we're going to lose a lot of jobs in the future to robots, that we give a guaranteed income. And I think a lot of times, there's some other things I've been reading about poverty too. And I just know in my own life, like how someone I was talking to today said his boss gave him $1,000 and then it changed his life. Like, and I'm just like, $1,000. Like, to me, that right now is nothing. But for some people, that is like life and death. Like, do you kind of feel like that's like a way that we can get out of this issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. I haven't explored the issue, but I do understand how $1,000 could actually be critical in someone's life, particularly if they're paying 50% of their income in rent, right? And then there's a health issue, or there's just regular issues that come up, issue with the car, and then you are making a choice between fixing your car and paying your rent, or fixing your car and having enough food, and those are just choices people shouldn't have to make. And I would be very interested to learn more about what are some financial opportunities that perhaps we haven't explored yet. I think, the college saving accounts are great. There is the Family Initiative Institute, I think it's called, or Family Independence Initiative, which is very much driven by creating more economic wealth within poor communities, family by family, and that has, I think, proven to be a great model. And it's, we really have to kind of get out of this. Everything is done through the nonprofit.
That's what I get worried about. It seems like it's always given to like the Red Cross or the nonprofit. It never gets to the people.
Yeah, and some of the nonprofit, and a lot of nonprofits are great. It's not. That's I work
not bashing them, but
work very closely with them. But I think that there has to be some level of financial autonomy that we're able to give the people who are most impacted by the issues, because the thing is that the systemic issues were created a long time ago, right? The issues of poverty in the Black and Latino communities very much created by redlining, right? And discrimination on jobs, on schools, and so these are things that have led to generations later where you're still struggling with the poverty, the results of those systemic injustices. And so we have to again, I just go back, we have to be bold, we have to think outside the box on how we're going to address this issue.
Excellent. This is Mike Crawford, the host, Young Jurks, and we're speaking to Alejandro St. Gian. Mm-hmm. Have I gotten it right every time?
You did, every single time.
Wow. I'm still, I'm working. I always say this on the show. I have a speech impediment since a young age, and now I'm forced to host shows, and I'm also a goofy looking, and now they put a camera right in my face with lighting, so I'm not always comfortable up here, but it's okay. It's fun.
You're doing great.
You're great. You make it easy for me. Our phone number, 502-501-3477, if you have a question for the city council candidate. You're on Facebook, you're on Twitter. I've seen you there. How can people find you on those platforms?
So at A Sankyang, ASTGUILLEN is my Twitter and Instagram. Facebook, Alejandra for Boston City Council. And AlejandraForBoston.com is my website.
And it's really, early in this campaign,
Yeah.
but you're already, from what I see, a pretty formidable candidate in this.
Hope so.
You hope so, right?
I mean, there's a lot of great candidates.
There will be, right?
There are a lot of great candidates, yeah.
How do you win? How do you, because, I can't even imagine doing this.
Yeah.
Is this your full-time job now? Or
It is. I'm fortunate enough, that and being a mother, of course, is also your other full-time
Which we saw.
job.
We saw
Yes,
Jose come over.
Yes, but my wife has been extremely supportive, and so I've been able to dedicate a significant amount of time to this. So, what I do is I continue to deliver my message. I think, one thing is that having worked within the city, having worked as an advocate, having worked as a teacher, I understand firsthand the policies and how they're made, right? And so I think I'm uniquely positioned that on day one, I'll be able to get to work. And so that is something that I tell people, and I just keep talking about my vision and talking across the city and right now, and also listening. One thing that's so important is listening to people and where they're at. So when I'm, like I said, housing wasn't something that I knew a ton about. It just always came out, even before I was a candidate, even when we would survey immigrant communities at the height of, the most awful administration in this whole that we've ever had, and people are fearing their lives and being deported, they still list housing as their number one concern. And so that is something that, I knew would rise to the top. So for me, it's how am I listening to across the spectrum and the where people stand on housing and, City Life Vida Urbana to CHAPA to CDC. I think there's just so much to learn, and it's an important time, and also to think broadly across the country and across the world of what our other cities are doing. And so, we have a very, strong plan, a strong, on the ground, on the doors, this it'll be a low turnout year. And what we're doing is we're looking to those voters that were engaged for the first time last year, right?
Yeah,
They were engaged.
Ayanna, Nika,
And
Rachel.
Anika. And I think if we can keep that electorate engaged, I think that'll be an important part of our victory. And but we want it to be a unifying message, and we want it to resonate across broad sectors of Boston.
This is great. I got a couple geeky kind of questions.
Sure.
Number one, on the cannabis issue.
Yep.
And you may not know,
Mm-hmm.
this may be something like Ricardo wasn't aware of and
Mm-hmm.
needed to find out more information. There's a cannabis buffer zone in Boston. It's a half-mile buffer zone.
It's too
Michael
big, right?
Flaherty put it in because he was worried that it was going to be like the combat zone with all the pot shops in one location downtown. And it just seems too narrow now, considering there needs to be like 40 of them in Boston. And where do you put them if it's a half-mile buffer zone? You can't do it. And what we're seeing is people of color are now, you can't have two shops in Roxbury. You can't,
Right. Right.
Can we change this, get rid of it, or, change it to say you only can have 5 shops in Roxbury?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we, this was an issue that we had as part of the criminal justice reform bill, is that having, dealing within 25 feet of a school, I don't know the exact amount, but it was you can't really
Anywhere in
be
Boston.
anywhere in Boston and not be,
because there's a school there,
and be in I don't remember what it was. I don't know if it's 25 feet or whatever it was, but it just
2,500 feet.
it was something that it just didn't. It made sense, right? Of course, you don't want people dealing to students, and and the vision of drug dealers in schoolyards obviously is something fearful, but in practice didn't make a lot of sense, and actually double criminalize people and some of them for cannabis, right?
For nothing.
Which is now legal. So I think it's something that you have to, that if I understand the spirit of the law, and perhaps why Flaherty was concerned, but I think it's something that we have to look and see, is it something that's actually realistic? What I have loved to see is, Kim Janey has been putting forward, this cannabis equity, and really pushing and saying, we're not trying to slow down the process. We're just trying to make it equitable, and that the people who suffered the most from archaic laws, now that those have been reversed, are able to have some benefit. It never repair the decades of harm that's been done to communities of color, in particular because of the war on drugs, but at the very least, we can make sure that our communities are benefiting from what is now a very lucrative industry.
I'm glad you brought that up because we had her on a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
we love her, and she's got the hearing coming up, and it shows that you
Tuesday,
said earlier
Tuesday,
that you know what's going on.
Yeah,
you bring up this is like a big issue for us right now.
Yeah,
and you're bringing up topical information. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You could be like if you don't end up being city council, which I think you might be. I'm not gonna knock on wood, but I will knock on wood. You could be my co-host anytime. You're really good. I love it. Yeah. So 502-501-3477 is our phone number if you want to call in. If you have a question, I thought I had another question, but now I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know. I think we're almost out of time anyways.
6:48.
Yeah. How can people help you? Why should they vote for you? Why should they support you? I think, make your pitch. Tell our audience.
Sure, absolutely. So, I'm someone who was born and raised in Mission Hill in the city of Boston and really benefited from a place where my parents lived in an expiring use apartment. So the rent was affordable. They didn't have to choose between healthcare and paying the rent or food and paying the rent. And that's something that impacted mine and my sister's ability to be successful in schools. We went through Boston Public Schools, graduated from Boston Latin School, and my path is one that I see is becoming less and less possible for many people across this city, and there are many reasons of that. And I think right now we are in a critical time. I said earlier that we're really at a crossroads where the policies that we're putting in place are going to have a huge impact on the people, on the type of city that we want to be. Right now, it's a tale of two cities, right? A city that's full, booming and economy strong, and that's great. But you also have a tale of people who are not benefiting from that boom. And so for me, it's important that, yes, we have the economic vitality, but we need to make sure we're all benefiting from it equitably. I think I'm somebody that, like I said, on day one, will be able to address these issues as you noted. I love municipal issues. I worked in immigrant advancement, but I, was deeply connected to different issues across the city, and very much, wanted to take this role and be able to bring my social justice lens to the city of Boston. What people can do if you want to be a part of this movement is to sign up online so that you stay in contact. This is going to be a big month. Signatures come out end of April. So we're having our big kickoff on the 24th, April 24th. And so, and that'll be an opportunity for people to come, get signature papers, and it'll be our first, one of our first opportunities to be on the doors. And that's, exactly what we're going to do. We're not taking one thing for granted. We know this election will be won on the doors. And so we need a full army of people to help us get there.
Excellent. I can't wait to see this campaign. I'm definitely supporting you.
Thank you.
I was with you like every single question and answer. I already know, I did figure out my last question. It's going to be quick. Barney Frank is here. We just noticed. Let's give Barney Frank a round of applause for joining us today. He's going to be coming up next. He's here. We're very excited for him. Before we let you go, though, Alejandra, you're running for city council. There's this issue that came up with the ICE, with the construction worker.
Yep.
I think a lot of people know about it, but I'll give it briefly real quick. Gentleman got hurt. His boss called ICE on him through the Boston police. And the Boston police said they weren't going to work with ICE, and they basically gave this guy a really rough time with a really serious injury because his employer didn't want to cover him
because they didn't want to pay.
And the employer broke the law with the Boston police and ICE helping him. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was really upset to see that article, to see this and hear the story. What we have in Boston is called a Trust Act, and my office was a big part of creating that. And the letter of the law in terms of what the Trust Act is really limits cooperation in terms of ICE detainers. So if ICE asks the Boston police to hold someone longer than they would otherwise be released, the Boston police won't do that. That is the letter of the law. However, the spirit of the law is that we do not cooperate with ICE, and we certainly do not cooperate to deport workers who have been injured, right? And so I think, one of the things that we're going to have to do, what I would do in the city council, or the city council can take it up now, is we need to strengthen that Trust Act, and we have to actually put in the letter of the law how we cooperate or don't cooperate with ICE. It's the same thing in the Boston Public Schools. Our school to deportation pipeline is something that we need to address, how we're mislabeling students as part of the gang database.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And if you are not a citizen, you can be deported just for the reports of who you're hanging out with and what you're wearing,
Who's
right?
at the bus stop?
And that is a system that is not equitable, and criminalization of our young men of color results in the school to prison pipeline, and also this school to deportation pipeline. And so I think we definitely have a mayor who's supportive of the immigrant community, is son of immigrants himself. But I do think that given this case and given the cases in the schools, we're going to have to delve a little deeper, and we're going to have to actually put in the letter of the law those protections that we think are there because the spirit of it is there, but the actual implementation of how we do that doesn't exist yet.
Thank you so much for coming
you.
in. Alejandra St. Guillen, running for city councilor at large in Boston.
Yeah.
We wish you the best of luck, and we
Thank
want you
you
to come back.
Yes,
Thank you.
I will definitely come back. This was super fun.
Awesome. And we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to have Bonnie Frank and Andrew from Beantown, Greentown, and we're also going to have some more passes to the New England Cannabis Convention, where we'll all be at next weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll be right back.